This podcast contains detailed plot spoilers, adult language, and mature themes. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome to a podcast of Rare Antiquities, episode 15. Today we'll be discussing the small-budget indie sci-fi flick Primer. I am your host, Geoff.
I am your co-host, Harry.
All right, well, Harry, welcome to the show again. Listen, let's start off. I mean, I know we usually reminisce at the top of the show. Was this a movie you were aware of when this movie came out in 2004? Did it hit your radar at all?
Not really, but I kept reading about it online as a movie to watch for science fiction, must-see science fiction flicks. I never got access to it immediately when I first heard about it, and then it just kind of slipped off my radar, and then reading later, went on my radar, but couldn't find it, and I'm not the kind of guy who's going to go out and buy a movie just based on word of mouth, so I had to figure out some way to watch it, and I won't tell you how I watched it this time, but
I'm sure it was all legal.
Yes, of course it is, man. What are you talking about?
Of course, yeah. No, that's why I said. I didn't want there to be any confusion for our audience that we would ever condone illegally.
I will make it legal. So. We still can't get through quoting those movies. Oh well. It's a long-lasting impression after getting through those.
Well, we did spend many an hour diving deep into that stuff. So
I finally watched it. But it was on my radar here and there.
Okay, great. Well, I mean, for me, it did not hit my radar when it first was released. It was a couple years later when it hit DVD. I kind of heard about sort of an indie science fiction film, which always piques my interest. And I've been on the search my whole life for the perfect time travel movie. Or the perfect time travel story. So, any time that something kind of comes up, I gravitate towards it right away. So I saw this movie probably 2006, 2007, and a couple times since, and never, well, we'll get into it a bit, never really was able to decode the plot of the film, really, but I've seen it a few times since then. So, but this is a very small. Go ahead, man.
Yeah, I just wanted to, sorry to interrupt. You said you were looking for the perfect time travel movie. Back to the Future, Star Trek movies, those do not qualify as perfect or almost perfect? To you?
Okay, well.
Just out of curiosity. I just want to know what bar you're setting perfection here.
That it makes sense.
That it
Perfect.
Makes sense.
That it doesn't drop, the logic ball at any point. Back to the Future does not pass the test, although it is a near perfect movie. But as far as the time travel logic goes, it's not, greatly flawed, and, it does a very good job. And that's okay because it's Back to the Future and it's about, so much more, and they can, they're able to kind of paint over some of those blemishes with, the honest performances and the energy of the film, but it's not perfect. Star Trek, if we're talking about the films, definitely not. Nothing's perfect about the time, how many time travel films were there at Star Trek?
I don't know.
Yeah. So definitely not. The time travel in Star Trek First Contact is abysmally ridiculous. And, in Star Trek 4, it's the time travel itself. Like there's no loops or logic or anything like that. So like they just go back in time to get some whales. The time travel is kind of irrelevant. So I don't really count that one.
Speaking of loops, it's been a while since I've seen it. Have you seen Looper?
I have seen Looper. Yeah. Have you seen interesting film? The time travel is total bullshit in that movie. It is, in fact, the time travel logic of Looper is the worst part of Looper.
Interesting. Okay.
But perhaps we can do a show on that because, definitely a good movie for discussion. But what about you? Any time travel movie favorites for yourself?
No.
Okay. All right.
Yeah,
that's
simple stuff. No,
fair enough.
Not that they're, perfect. It's as you said, like, for me, yeah, I mean, I'm sure we'll get into it. I think the focus of this movie is really about the mechanism of time travel.
Yeah.
Versus something else, right? Like what the heart of the story is you mentioned Back to the Future or Star Trek movies and stuff, time travel is just a MacGuffin or a mechanism.
Yeah.
To tell the story something else, what's going on. Here it's just about the time travel. In a sense, I'd say a little more so, but it'll be we can talk about it later.
Yeah. I'll throw a couple of details about the film at you here, just to kind of contextualize it. This is an ultra low budget film. It was made for around $7,000 US. Very difficult to make a film. Most of the budget, in fact, was spent on the film stock itself.
Excellent. So I can make a movie about going back in time and killing you. So it's great. I can afford it.
You could afford it. Yeah,
Yes.
You could afford it. I'm sure you also have the talent and resourcefulness to pull off such a feat. I'll talk a little bit about how the budget kind of factors in, or the low budget feel of factors in as we get in. But I think it's important to note that this is very low budget. It grossed approximately $425,000 US in its theatrical run. So certainly not a smash hit by any means, but when you consider how small the budget was, fairly successful. It opened on October 10th, 2004 on only 4 screens. Its widest release was 31 screens, so it was very, very limited. Yeah. This film was sort of shot and produced Robert Rodriguez style. The director, Shane Carruth, he was the writer, director, star, sound production, design, all of that stuff on this film. So he basically made the film with his own bare hands, if you will. They spent about 6 months actually shooting the film, and then he spent 2 years in post-production before this hit the screen. What's interesting is this did not really lead to much of a career for himself or anybody else involved with the film. He has one other film to his credit, a film called Upstream Color, another small film which came out in 2012, I believe. His co-star, David Sullivan, actually is the only one who's sort of gone on to a career, a solid working actor. He's got about 50 credits to his name. He's been on TV and a couple of films. And Primer did win the Grand Jury Prize at the Sundance Film Festival in 2004. So, it does have a little bit of hardware to call its own, but, yeah, it's never really kind of graduated from, I guess you could say relative obscurity. It shows up on lists here and there. Still not a very widely enjoyed or widely watched film. So, but I figure it's time to get to the plot synopsis. Is there any other thoughts you want to get out there before we jump in?
Only thought is good luck with the plot synopsis.
I did my best, man. I'll say this before I get into the plot synopsis is not going to hit every nook and cranny. I've got we'll kind of get into that when we do the blow by blow, but this should hopefully give a reasonable idea of what happens. So here we go. Primer. 2 entrepreneurial engineers, Abe and Aaron, supplement their day jobs by working on tech projects out of Aaron's garage, trying to stumble across the next great innovation. While working on a device that can reduce an object's mass through electromagnetic induction, they discover that they have created a time loop where an object can exit the loop at a point in time before it entered. Abe builds a larger version of the box, one able to house a human subject, and uses the box to travel 6 hours into his own past. Future Abe tracks down Aaron and explains that he has traveled back in time 6 hours as proof of concept. And like any noble, world-changing geniuses would, they set to work on using this fantastic technology to save the world. Maybe that's too much work. They decide to just get rich instead. Here's the plan. They each construct a box, house it inside a storage facility, and set the box to activate in 15 minutes. They then head to a hotel, watch basketball and hotel porn for 6 hours, or whatever it is you do when sequestered away, and then head back to the storage facility, deactivate the box, and climb inside for 6 hours, only to emerge 6 hours in the past with knowledge of the day's events. They place some stock trades, make a few bucks, rinse, and repeat. After a few of these trips, Aaron begins to wonder at the possibilities. Could he, say, punch a dude in the face, like really lay one on him, and then go back and stop himself in order to avoid the consequences? Late one night, as Aaron and Abe hatch a plan to punch some dude in the face, they come across Abe's girlfriend's father, Thomas Granger, looking a little rough around the edges. He has a few days more beard growth than he should, and his proximity to Aaron knocks him into a coma. Granger must have used the box to come back in time, but who could have told him about the box, and why? Did some future emergency cause Abe or Aaron to tell him about the box and send him back to stop something? It's impossible to know for certain, but Abe concludes that this whole time travel thing is just a little too dangerous. Abe reveals a third box, running this whole time, designed as a failsafe in case something went wrong. Abe travels back to the beginning to stop the whole experiment, but Aaron is way ahead of him. Aaron found out about the failsafe box and used it to come back first, with another box in tow. His objective? To prevent an incident where Abe's girlfriend was nearly killed by her shotgun-toting ex-boyfriend. Their mission is a success, but now there are 2 Abes in the present time, along with 3 Aarons, and no way to reconcile their disparate time frames. Future Abe stays to watch over his alternate self and his girlfriend, forever lost to him, to prevent any possibility of the box being built again. The 2 alternate Aarons vanish, with all knowledge of how to perfect time travel, and perhaps build the box once again. The end. So that's the best I could boil it down. Again, usually at this point of the show, we're asking if this is compelling. Does this sound like an interesting time travel plot to you from what I've detailed so far?
I would say mixed, mainly because you left out, I guess, some of the details we'll eventually talk about, just based on the synopsis. But I mean, it was a good job because you simplified it. It's pretty complicated. Like even the number of boxes you have to wrap your head around. I still don't even know if I get it all.
Yeah.
What's in the box?
What's in the box?
You know, at the end of this movie, I just want an infinite loop of Brad Pitt just doing his head bob.
He can bring in George Clooney too, with the head bob.
No, that's when he goes back. George Clooney because, Brad Pitt goes in the box, Clooney comes out.
Clooney comes out. There you go. That's what happened. That's what happened. George Clooney is the future version of Brad Pitt. There, that'll blow your mind, ladies and gentlemen.
I guess so.
Yeah, no, definitely it's a film that, it's hard to just sort of look at the plot and actually figure out what's going on. And I think there's some interesting things to kind of be unpacked here. It is difficult to kind of decode because there is no exposition in this film, whatsoever. You really gotta watch and pay attention in order to get it. And even then, you need to sort of speculate, fill in the blanks, I think. So, if we get into the, any other thoughts before we kind of get into the scene by scene here?
No, let's go for it.
All right. So the film opens. I actually love the opening line. It appears to be a phone call or an answering machine message. And the line is, here's what's going to happen. And, I love how that opens because, a story is about to unfold here. So
yeah, it's like the narrative.
Yeah.
In a sense.
Yeah. In a sense, it's like the narrative. That's right. So we meet 4, sort of working class engineers. And the names are important, I think, because it's easier to keep straight. But Aaron, Abe, Philip, and Robert. Aaron and Abe are our principals. Philip and Robert are a couple of placeholders, basically. So they work at some engineering firm, and then we see them they make some homemade electronic products. Basically in Aaron's garage in their spare time. The movie opens, they've had some interesting patents. They haven't made any money. And, we kind of hear a side note about a guy named Joseph Platts who stole a previous idea of theirs and they had no recourse. So, I really liked, they're working in the garage. They're sitting around the kitchen table. They haven't struck it rich. They're sort of hand packaging all these items that they've sold. And I get the feeling, I think it's obviously sort of meant to evoke, the early days of sort of the computer revolution in Silicon Valley, just a couple guys soldering parts together in a garage. And, you don't get any fancy sets or sci-fi CGI stuff going on, just, real rough around the edges kind of stuff. What did you think about, that particular choice?
Yeah, I liked the realism in that sense. As you mentioned, the innovation back in the day in Silicon Valley, and it's just, some nobodies working away in non-luxurious space, just a very makeshift lab area where they can discuss and work and do their ideas, right? Which is just their garage or the kitchen of their one guy's house,
Yeah.
That's pretty much it. And I liked that grounded the movie a little bit there.
Yeah.
You could start to relate to these guys in a sense. Well, at least I can because, I understand these people. But
yeah. Doing science for the man for peanuts, basically, is what the part you can understand, right?
Yes, essentially. So yeah, I enjoyed that. And yeah, you're right. It reminds you of, I guess, how should I say it? I would expect that most of mankind's inventions have not happened in the confines of billion-dollar laboratories.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of them are in these no-name places, where guys just drink booze, that's dirty. It's not sterile, it's not clean, and it's just makeshift, right? Because they can't afford anything else. And that's where the true geniuses are born.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think that's a great place to ground the movie in its opening. I also really enjoyed where they go into technical jargon. They're trying to build some kind of device and they're pointing at technical diagrams on the wall.
I was waiting for a reference to the Heisenberg compensators, but I didn't get
Heisenberg compensator. What about the hydrospanners or the I don't know. But I love the technobabble here because they don't explain shit. And it's way past, the layperson's level of knowledge. So I find it very honest in that way as well. I think it's pretty cool. Yeah. So Aaron and Abe they've developed this device and we don't really get an idea of what they're doing. We can see that they're trying to remove the coolant from some kind of device. But as we can see, they put an object in this box and it seems to reduce the mass of this object. So right there, that, you're going to see some serious shit.
Yeah. I like the reference there.
Thank you. Yeah. So basically they're building an anti-gravitational device, electromagnetically coupled, which is also a pretty cool idea. I liked how they, when they're building it, they're cannibalizing everything. They take the catalytic converter out of the guy's car for some palladium. They're scavenging like a microwave, refrigerator, all kinds of this other shit. And, in order just to build this little box. So again, kind of going back to what we were saying, these guys are broke. They don't have anything. They just have to build it from what they've got. And I thought that was a pretty cool idea there.
Yeah. No, it worked for sure.
Mm-hmm. So they don't really, so they know that they've, created this machine that can theoretically reduce the mass of an object. They're trying to figure out exactly, what it's doing and how they can monetize it, right? They don't really know.
Right.
So while they're working on some of the theoretical problems, they try to establish funding from another tech businessman named Thomas Granger. And in the course of the months of working with this Granger, Abe gets together with his daughter Rachel, and that relationship will become important later on, obviously. So they're still working on how the device works.
I want to just point out, you're getting your first instance here where I know that they need funding to actually make what they want to make.
Yeah.
Their projects, so that's understandable. But you mentioned before, they're just trying to figure out ways to monetize their inventions. Yeah. This is again, and I think we could talk about it, it's the first sign of the purpose behind what they really want to do. It's about greed.
Yeah.
It's not about innovation. It's more about just making money.
Yeah, I think I half agree with you. I mean, obviously they need to find a way to monetize it, because if they don't find a way to monetize it, then they have to abandon the project. So I think there's a combination there. I think that they are actually interested in the science and the knowledge, but, and as we see later, obviously they want to make a bunch of money. I mean, that's why they're in this field, in this area, is they want to make a bunch of money. But I also get the impression that they want to do it in the absolute coolest way possible. Yeah. But that's real world. That's exactly how the innovators have worked, generally speaking. These guys want to make
in the modern world today. Yes.
Yeah, in the modern world. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So now we get to a scene where Aaron is sitting on a bench, listening to his earphone, and Abe approaches. He looks a little out of sorts, and I like the line here where Aaron's like, I've been calling you all day. Called you at work, called you at home. And he kind of looks up and he's like, I'm not there. And so right now, something's kind of off. And because we know it's a time travel movie, obviously, you can connect the dots. But I liked how, so now we get to the point where Abe is walking Aaron through what the discoveries are going to be. Mm-hmm. And specifically the little weevil that they put inside the box. They discover there's a fungus growing on it. They take it for analysis. This is the only kind of exposition that we get here as they go to some experts to figure out.
Yeah, I kind of wish that, I think this scene I wasn't too much of a fan of. I kind of wish it'd be hard to maybe figure out another way to do it. It was kind of confusing at first. So what kind of moss is this? I was getting confused. Are you talking about like a interdimensional moss? Or it's just like growth? I think they took a long time to really, at least that's my interpretation.
Yeah, they did kind of take a long time. It was very technical. They were talking about some protein secreted by fungus or some shit. I don't know. But you're right.
I didn't like this part of the movie with the fungus at all. I felt that they could have done something a little different here.
Well, I think I agree with you there because this point, like it's, because of how technical they made it, it's easy to lose the viewer at a point where it's not really necessary to lose someone.
Exactly. Because already before, it's not a fast movie. It's a slow movie. It's a real movie. Yeah. And so much, as you said, it's so much talking about tech and innovations and guys are just sitting around and talking about it. There's no MacGuffin yet. And then you go from that to talking about this moss. I think they could have either skipped it all or it should have been something a little bit more easier to follow or interesting.
Yeah. They could have cut it down a little bit because shit's going to get real. You don't need to lose somebody talking about fungus. Yeah. For sure. But fungi. So as we see that the amount of growth on this item here is consistent with years of growth, not minutes or days or anything. So
I wanted to ask that question too, since that was years. And they can only do hours, which we'll get into. I'm a little lost here. I've only seen the movie once.
Okay.
So you've seen it a few times. Why don't you enlighten me?
Yeah.
I don't know if now's the time to explain it or later.
Okay. So you're asking the question, how could it have been in there for years?
Well, I mean, it's fine if it's in there for years, but what is the catalyst or the driving factor to say when they start going in these boxes?
Yeah.
Why is it they are only doing 6 hours and that's a fixed amount of time? Going backwards in time 6 hours, but the fungus did 6 years or however.
Okay.
Years. I'm a little confused.
Okay. Okay. So I guess at this point, because this is where, basically, Abe describes to Aaron what's happening here is, so the box that they created is a time loop, right? So when they turn the box on, that starts at point A. And as it's powering up, you can put the object in the box. And when they turn the box off, that's point B.
Yep.
Right. And there's a certain power down time there, right? Where you could take an item out. So what happens is that they put the item in there and it goes from point A to point B and then it cycles back to point A and and then it'll cycle forward to point B. So it'll stay inside this loop indefinitely until they actually physically remove the thing from the box and break the waveform.
Okay.
Or collapse the waveform.
A perpetual loop until you take it out.
Exactly.
Okay, but then my question is, later when they go in the box, don't they still have to wait out 6 hours of actual time to go back 6 hours in time?
They do indeed, yes.
Yeah. So then I don't understand how this thing, whatever was creating this fungus or the fungus itself, if it had to be in there for years, I don't understand the length of time that it was actually in there in reality.
Right.
So that's where I'm getting confused.
So how I had to do a little bit of research here. So what I understand is that at a certain point, because they say at a certain point, or at any point along its loop from point A to point B, there's a certain probability that it will just drop out of the loop by itself. Okay. And after a certain number of trips through, something like 1337 loops through, the probability is greater than 50% that it would drop out. So it just drops out, on its own after a certain amount of time. So, it basically cycles. Oh man, hold on a second. I got this. I got this. Okay.
I don't know if this is a plot hole. I'm not sure.
Well, so here's what they say in the movie. Okay. So, in order to collapse the waveform, they gotta open the box and take the thing, or they gotta open the box, which is an allusion to the Schrodinger's cat, paradox, right? So they open the box. So if they put the Weeble in at point A, the amount of time experienced by it is they get 1347 minutes. So, after they find that after about 1300 trips from point A to point B, the probability is better than even that that the waveform will collapse. So it usually works out to roughly 1300 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm guessing that they left it in there because they would have kept the experiment going. They just kept running the experiments over the course of a few days. It ended up going through 5 years, I guess.
Okay. That was where I was getting lost, because I thought maybe if he just did this once or twice, how did this moss grow for years?
Yeah, no, that's
didn't make any sense.
No, good, and that's a good catch. And I think that, we don't really know how many times they kind of experimented with it either, because remember that they had months between when they sort of first started experimenting to, trying to get funding, right? So several months pass. So depending on how many times they throw it.
You're right, but they were just building this thing. And they were still tinkering with it until it actually worked, in my opinion. It wasn't like it worked and then it was months of them trying to figure out what the fuck this thing was. At least that's from my memory.
Yeah, well, it's kind of not really clear. Like we see that they've built something and it does the thing that they don't really understand. And then months go by and we don't really know what's kind of happening in between. I got the impression that they were still testing it and they were using the same item, but it's not explicitly shown. No,
and I think that's a dropped ball there. Because if you're going to use this as a MacGuffin, this one item to really launch the tale, I think a little bit better of an explanation.
No, that's fair enough. I'm loath to try to go back and do the math on it to see if it actually works, but part of me wants to. But those science days are far behind me now, so maybe you can take on that task for
that's all right,
next time. That's your homework. Yeah.
That's our viewers' homework. Anyone who can prove me wrong or prove Geoff right or wrong,
we'll send you a T-shirt with our smiling faces on it. And I just guarantee that nobody wants to claim the prize.
Oh yeah.
So as part of the reveal here, so as Abe and Aaron are talking about how to make this thing work, they theorized they could build a box, and if they could put an intelligent agent inside the box, it could deliberately exit the box before it entered, and thereby traveling backwards in time. So again, because the waveform can only be broken theoretically from the outside by somebody opening the box, if there's something inside the box, it can decide when to come out. It can choose to exit the time loop before it entered it. Then we see that so Abe takes Aaron to the storage facility. They're drinking a couple of Cokes, and through the binoculars, standing next to Abe, Aaron sees Abe across this field entering the storage facility. And how he explains it is that Abe builds a larger version of the box, basically a coffin-sized time machine, put it in the storage facility. I'll go through the times here as I've read them out just to help clarify. So at 8:30 a.m. Monday morning, Abe primes the box A to activate itself in 15 minutes. He then drives away from the storage facility and sequesters himself at a hotel, say 15 minutes down the road. Then the box activates at 8:45 a.m. and is completely powered up. We'll skip ahead. So at 3:15 p.m., Abe leaves the hotel, returns to box A, and switches it off. Now, as we've seen previously, when they switch it off, it still retains power for a few seconds as the waveform collapses, which takes about 4 minutes. So as the power's down, he gets inside the box and waits about 6 hours, and then climbs out of the box. And as he's waited 6 hours, he actually exits the box at 8:45 when the box is timed to power up. And at that point is when he approaches Aaron when he's sitting on the bench. And now it's 3:15 again, and Aaron and Abe see Abe get into the box to climb in and switch it off and then sort of disappear into the past.
Very confusing.
Very confusing. Yes, very confusing.
But interesting.
But interesting, exactly. So we're getting our heads around it. So at this point, so we can see that they've invented this time machine, and there's some type of loop going on. Were you able to kind of pick up the logic of what Abe has done here?
In a sense, obviously, when he's first meeting Aaron on the bench, that's his. Correct me if I'm wrong. That's his past self who's come out of the loop.
Yeah.
Correct. So then his current,
that's right.
And then he's purposely not bumping into his existing self, and he's watching with Aaron how his existing self, or in that timeline that coexists with Aaron, that Abe is going into the box.
Correct.
It's proving to him that he is from the past, and that's the guy who's going to be going into the box, who will eventually go into the past, which is a loop.
Yeah, that's right. And, I mean, I think at this point, I mean, I remember the first time I saw this and I was confused, but kind of going with it, but I actually enjoyed the confusion. It sort of added to the, I don't want to say mystery of the whole thing, but it adds to the atmosphere. I mean, something strange is going on, and I like not knowing every single thing that's happening as I watch a film. It helps, unpack the puzzle over time. So, anyway, so the practical application of this is, when the next day Abe shows Aaron that he had made a very excellent stock trade on Monday. And, at this point, we have how they're going to monetize it. So now we have a second box built, one for Aaron, and one for Abe. They switch the boxes on at 8:30 a.m. on Tuesday morning. They drive 2 cars to the storage facility. They take 1 car back to the hotel and hang out at the hotel, come back at 3:15, turn off the boxes, jump in, get out. And this is Aaron's first ride, and he exits, and he has a physical reaction to it. He's not quite, he's woozy. It's not quite going. So what they're trying to do here is, through the dialogue, we see that they're trying to modify history as little as possible. So they're isolating themselves at this hotel so that they can minimize any causality. They don't want to run into themselves. They don't want to try to do anything that would maybe prevent their doubles from getting out of the box or anything that would mess with the time frame. The only objective for them to accomplish is find what stocks had a good day. Yeah.
Yeah. Make money.
Yeah, exactly. Let's make some money.
So again, going back to, I don't blame him, because I'd be doing the same thing. I think pretty much 99.99% of the people would be doing that. Anybody on this planet, right, as humans. But I, again, still find it that the first thing they want to do is, instead of maybe using this for the greater good or doing something interesting, a little bit more interesting with it, the first thing is greed. So again, showing, you're saying, if they want to monetize it, yeah, so that's the first thing they do is, I don't know why they didn't do lottery.
Well, they talk about that, cause that's what Aaron says, like, why don't we do the lottery? And Abe says, well, what was the jackpot there? However many $1 million, that's what, a couple $100,000 a year for the next 30 years? Cause the reason they don't do the lottery is cause they can do so much better. Or that's the explanation they give through the dialogue there. And I totally bought it. Like, let's make a bunch of money. And I figure that's what anybody would do. Even if you wanted to try to use it for altruistic, means, let's make some money first, make sure we're set, and then we can go and, do good. Which, in fact, is also a characteristic of a lot of entrepreneurs. I mean, if you take a look at, Bill Gates, for example, I mean, the man spent his whole life, building a massive empire and amassing a huge fortune. He's one of the richest guys in the world. And now in his later years, he's writing checks for charities, helping to, cure malaria in third world countries and shit like that. So, it's completely believable because that's exactly what these types of guys do.
Yeah. No, I agree with you.
There's another important point here to highlight is that through the dialogue is we are led to believe that the boxes are kind of one-time use only. So what that means is that after you've climbed out of the box, you can't go back to it later, switch it off, and climb in a second time because that's what your past self did. So you can't use the same box to continuously loop through the same day.
Okay.
That's what they lead us to believe at this point.
Yeah, I completely missed that on my first viewing.
Yeah. It's an important point because it leads us to believe that they're both under this assumption at this point.
Mm-hmm.
So they make some more money in the stock market. And again, this is only their second trip through. And that evening, so they're hanging out at Aaron's house there. He's chilling on the couch. He's got the beer bottle balanced on his chest. And they ask Aaron's wife about, they're like, what would you do if you had unlimited wealth? They're just, dreaming at this point. Now, Kara doesn't know, or the wife doesn't know anything about it. And these two guys they both know this is going to be a reality. And she's like, I don't know, like, what do you do? Try to do some good. I'm not really sure. And they pose the question to Aaron, and he says that he would like to be able to go back, say, punch somebody in the face, Joseph Platz, the guy who screwed them before, and then being able to go back and stop himself from doing it, or basically making it so it never happens, so that he doesn't
So he
have to
does
live
it,
with
and then he corrects it.
Exactly. So then he doesn't have to live with the consequences of doing something immoral, but he still gets the pleasure of doing something immoral.
Yeah.
And I thought that this was really interesting at this point, because this is worse than greed.
Yeah, I'd be going back and doing horrible, horrible things to you, but that's okay.
Yeah, that's
over and over.
over and over and over again. Well, thanks, man. That's really sweet to hear. I'm really happy
I'm just joking.
to be that guy. It's a little weird, but anyway, and there's, we get a voiceover here, Abe's like, we can't, you can't do that. And, as Aaron says, or the voiceover says, the idea had been spoken and the words wouldn't go back once they've been uttered aloud. And we have here, a version of Pandora's box. Once it's out there, there's no putting it back.
Because that means the temptation will always be there.
Exactly. The temptation's there. That's right.
So
and
once you've uttered it, it's going to fucking happen.
Exactly. So the next day on Wednesday, we get a little scene there where they're at the gas station and they're talking about, some of the philosophy of what's happening here, free will, paranoia, predestination. Aaron sort of raises the problem of living in a universe that's been engineered by somebody else. So we get some intimation here that they're starting to wrestle with some of the more existential philosophical problems of what it is that they're doing. What's free will mean if, is their destiny at this point because they effectively have created time loops for themselves. So let's just talk about some philosophy here. Is there such a thing as predestination, or is free will a real thing?
Oh, geez. Those are big concepts.
We're going into it, man.
I'd say it's a mix of both. I mean, how can you lean one way or another? Because you have free will, for sure, to make any choice you want at any given time. But it's just like what Yoda says, like once you start down that dark path, forever it will dominate your destiny.
Yeah.
So there's some stuff like that maybe we don't fully understand as humans. And maybe this is going to be applicable to the laws of nature, the laws of the universe as well, that it's momentum. Once you have a certain thought, or maybe the way the human mind works, you have free will, but then you also don't. That one thought will just lead to more thoughts in the same direction. It's a snowball effect. It'll keep going. These are just things that I've thought about in the past too, applicable to like human nature, human desires, evil acts, greed. It takes a very, very special person to maybe always ensure that free will is more dominant than, as you're putting it, predestination.
I tend to agree that it's almost a combination of the two. I mean, I was thinking of a point that was brought up in the film Minority Report, directed by Steven Spielberg. And there's a line that close to the end there, Tom Cruise says something along the lines of, when you know your future, you can change it. But that also means that if you don't know your future, you can't change it. You're always going to make the decision that you're going to make because you don't know what the outcome is going to be, so you can't make a different decision. You're going to make the decision you're going to make. So I think that's an interesting perspective on free will. You can choose whatever you want, but you're going to make the decision that you're going to make in that moment because you don't know what the outcome is. And you can't change it because when you make a mistake, you don't know that it's the wrong decision. You make a mistake and then you go forward. So,
and then in the end, I mean, the perfect example also, you can as good as life and death.
Mm-hmm.
Unless you're Tolian Zorin, you're not really going to be.
Time, Captain, is the fire in which we burn.
Yeah, so I mean, you can't escape death, right? So that's predestination.
Well, you can't escape death. I mean, that's true, but if you could make a decision that would prolong your life, maybe by 5 years or 10 years, you could avoid a car accident or quit smoking earlier and prevent cancer or any number of these things. Because you don't know you're going to get into the car accident, you can't zig instead of zag. You're always going to zag because you're making the decision in that moment, not knowing what's going to happen, right?
But then again, so I mean, I agree. It's a combination of the two. And then also is this like, you're talking about, again, human nature. I mean, we might be getting a little segue here, but say, for example, if someone knows that they're going to have a heart attack based on a bad diet, for example. They say that'll happen 20 years down the road. Guess what? What's that one guy most likely going to do? He's still going to pig out saying, I've got time. He's going to procrastinate. I've got time. And he's still heading in that one direction. Most people will still be that way. They're still not going to escape it. They're not going to be able to change their nature.
No, exactly. They're not going to change their nature because, I mean, effectively you can't. You really can't.
Well, I mean, you can, and there are examples of people who do. So I'm not saying that that never happens, but maybe it's too late anyways. But I mean, look at human history too. We keep making the same mistakes over and over again.
Yeah, that's right.
So
yeah.
I don't think these filmmakers are thinking about these concepts necessarily, because I think they're more interested in the science of itself instead of the philosophical questions that you're bringing up. I don't think that's the focus of this movie, in my opinion.
I agree. I don't think it's the focus about this movie, but it does make me want to consider the questions. But you're right. It's not really in the content here. I think that's correct. Yeah. So, okay. Well, let's kind of get back on track here. I mean, so after their philosophical discussion at the gas station, they're kind of discussing some of the issues about keeping the time machine secret from Aaron's wife, keeping it from their other business partners, Robert and Philip. They discuss a couple of small items, patent rights and all that kind of stuff. Really, it's just
brown guy gets screwed again.
The brown guy always gets screwed. Sure. And they had to make him look so brown too, didn't they? Like,
he didn't have an accent, so I applauded that.
That's true. Yeah. I didn't hear like there's the Indian music in the background when he came on. He wasn't doing like dance and stuff. So it wasn't like supremely racist. It was just sort of regular racist.
Yeah.
So at this point, they get back out on Wednesday. And at this point, Aaron is having really negative reaction. He's bleeding out of his ear. They make their successful trades. And then we get a scene here, and this one was a little hard to understand at first, but I had to look it up, and this was kind of a problem with the movie here. But there's a scene where Robert is out with Abe looking for the cat. Oh, hold on a sec. That might not be that's not correct. Okay, sorry. You might have to cut that out or not, whatever. Robert tells an interesting story to Abe. So the Monday night, 2 days previous, was this Robert guy's birthday party. Abe wasn't there, but his girlfriend Rachel was. And Rachel's ex-boyfriend also shows up to this party, but he's waving around a shotgun. And the story goes that Aaron, who was out also at the party, risks his life to defuse the situation safely. And now Aaron and Abe on Wednesday night are out looking for the cat. And, Abe is kind of calling Aaron out. It's like, you've got a family, you've got a kid, you can't be taking risks that way. He seems sort of confused that Aaron would be so irresponsible. And Aaron's, talking some bullshit. Oh, I see the world differently and everything, but he's being a little bit coy. So something else is kind of going down here, but it's, information that's important for later on. I found this an odd scene going through the movie. So think about going through the movie and watching this scene. Do you get the idea that there's something more important going on here, or is this just some bullshit that you're not really sure of?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't really pick up on that because I think obviously what this leads to is that he's time traveling on his own, correct? That's...
In a way, yes. Yes, that's right. Yeah.
So he was able to see things before they happen in a Jedi way.
Yeah.
So that's how he was able to save the person.
I thought he just had stupendous reflexes, but, yeah.
So yeah, I figured that was probably the case, but I didn't really linger on that too much. It kind of, I guess when they later kind of explain it, then it was like I knew it before they even admitted it. That thought was just implanted in my head at this scene.
Okay, so we move forward to Thursday now. Same routine again. They're hanging out at the hotel, and Aaron's cell phone rings, and this is breaking their rules because they're supposed to not keep their phones. They have to be completely sequestered, no outside contact. He answers the phone, talks to his wife about their dinner plans, and Abe's like, "You can't bring your phone. Like we can't have any contact in order to avoid a possibility of paradox, right?
Yeah, in the timeline.
Exactly. I kind of like the scene here.
I like how they talk about this kind of stuff.
Yeah, exactly. These are the questions that we want answered. And I also like how they kind of ground it again as he's watching the basketball game. And he's like, hold on a second. This isn't how this is supposed to go. And then he's like, oh, okay, I remember how the game happens. And it's a small detail, but Abe like sets up this like gigantic skull-sized muffin on a plate. He's got his place setting there and he's eating this muffin with a knife and fork, George Costanza style, which I really liked. Now when they go back and Aaron's cell phone rings at the same point that it rang before in the hotel. And now they have this discussion on how the hell the cell phones work, right? Whose phone is ringing? Are they both ringing or is only one ringing?
Yeah, that's an interesting discussion.
Yeah.
Because they're both on the same carrier. It doesn't matter if it's 6 hours in the past or which one it is, right?
Exactly. It's effectively the same. It's the same phone. They think that if the phone in the hotel, what they figure is only one phone can be ringing. So even though he doesn't answer it, have they now created a paradox? And they're not sure because they have no proof of anything. So here I get the sense, what I like here is like, this is sort of the first time they really encounter a crisis of causality. They're not sure what the hell's happening and they're dealing with it by, kind of trying to explain it scientifically. Like he's trying to explain how fucking cell phones work. And I kind of liked how they dealt with that conflict as a couple of scientists. I thought it's a small detail, but I thought it was interesting and it starts to raise some interesting questions. What did you think of that detail?
I like how they bring up the idea.
Mm-hmm.
It was a good discussion topic. Big blockbuster movies probably wouldn't be here talking about cell phones. They'd probably be talking about the larger paradoxes that you would experience. How, all of a sudden, if you meet your own self, one of you is going to disappear or the whole universe is going to collapse and stuff like that. Here we're talking about something a little bit more simple and more realistic and grounded. And it's like, oh, well, if the cell phone, which one's going to ring? Are they both going to ring in this timeline with my other self or because they're on the same carrier? That's not being affected at all. So should I answer it? Should I not answer it? Obviously, the simple solution is they should have just, when you do the time travel or you get a different phone each time.
Yeah.
The two guys going back.
Yeah.
Go purchase a prepaid phone, a brand new one every time you do a loop. So essentially, I like that part of the conversation that they're having because it's not a big topic. It's more of a realistic, grounded topic that probably really isn't brought up a lot in other similar time travel movies.
Right.
Something as simple as the technology itself.
Yeah.
Like a simple thing like a technology that goes back with you, like a cell phone. But the way to counteract that, if I was them, I would say, hey, every time we do a jump or we go to the box, each of us buys a brand new prepaid phone. Because obviously you're going to be able to afford it.
Yeah. Did they have
money.
prepaid phones in 2004?
I'm pretty sure they did.
Yeah. Well, I think they had said they had rules, they couldn't bring all that stuff, with them. And, I don't know. I got the impression that Aaron was bringing his phone with him on purpose and he wasn't being clumsy, but it's never really explained if that's the case. But that's the impression I got.
Yeah, I would say so. I'm just saying that that's one way to solve the paradox.
Yeah.
Is that every single time you go back or you get into the box, both of you are buying brand new prepaid phones before you go.
Yeah.
And then you dump it, and then so your another self can't call on that same frequency, or your family can't, or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
No chance of a paradox, because then you buy a brand new one, go back in.
Right.
A different number.
Yeah, good plan. You know what? We should build our own time machine, and we got this shit locked down, man.
Yes.
Okay, so then we come
going back to 1993, man. Gretzky, you're in fucking trouble.
Speaking of destiny, I'm pretty sure that's a fixed point in time. It's immutable. You can't change it. Can't change it. So we get to Friday morning at 2 a.m. We see a scene of some kids on skateboards being punks, setting off car alarms outside Abe's house. Abe goes to Aaron's house, gets him out of bed, and Abe is he's informed him that he's been routinely turning the boxes on at 5 p.m. and turning them off the following morning, presumably so that if they ever needed it, they could use the boxes to go back to the previous evening. So Abe puts forward a plan to basically execute Aaron's idea of punching this guy, Joseph Platts, in the face, and then using the boxes to go back in time to the previous afternoon and make sure. And so what they would do is that they would stop the kids from setting off the car alarms so that they'd never wake up in the middle of the night, and then they'd never go punch the guy, thereby preventing it from ever happening. But they would still have had the pleasure of popping the guy in the face. So in theory, they would stay in bed all night and then get back in the boxes on Friday as normal, and would be no problem. However, as they're driving away, they realize that, so they notice the car of Abe's girlfriend, which he says is actually her dad's car, Thomas Granger, the guy that gave them funding. So they're freaking out. They're wondering what the hell he's sitting outside, his house for. And, they make the note that he looks like he's got several days, growth of beard on his face. But the last time that they saw him, he was clean shaven. So Abe phones Thomas Granger's phone number, and he answers, but he's not the same guy in the car. So
I have a question for you.
Okay.
For you. So I understand all of that, right?
Yeah.
How can they determine that he's got the beard growth and all this stuff going on from they're driving in the car, correct?
Yeah.
And they're seeing a car following him.
Yeah.
How are they seeing he's got this bearded, like a 5 o'clock shadow or a couple of days growth of beard?
Well, Aaron I believe, if I recall correctly, Aaron actually gets out of the car and looks back at him, and he can see him, if not like face to face, but there's only, 100 feet or so, and he can see his face. And I mean, it's a bit of a stretch, but it's
a bit of a stretch.
Yeah. And that's just a device to let us know that they know something is wrong, or that, oh shit, this guy's come back.
Yeah. He's time traveling because they called together his current self.
Exactly. Yeah. So a couple of clues, and I guess that helps sort of make the jump. It's hard. It wasn't portrayed well on film, because we don't really see the guy's face at all. So that's kind of what happens there. Aaron runs after Granger, and this is also, I felt not captured very well on film, but they both basically, bail in the back alley there. Granger's completely unconscious, and, Aaron's down. So something weird's definitely going on, but Granger's basically in a coma. They take him back to Abe's house, throw him in bed, and, then they go back to check on the boxes to see that they're on. So they're thinking, like, they have the conversation. Did Granger come back in time? If so, how did he know about the boxes? Who would have told him? And, they have this conversation. They're like, well, I wouldn't have told him. I wouldn't have told him. I wouldn't have told him. And I can't remember who says what to who, but, one of them says that, what if there was an emergency? And the other says, well, so you would have told somebody if there was an emergency. So we're led to believe that in some crisis situation at some point in the future, they told Thomas Granger about it, and Granger was invested enough in that situation to come back to that point to whether to observe these guys, to prevent something from happening. Obviously, it looked like a desperation move, and the guy didn't even take the time to shave. So I get the idea that there's some kind of problem here.
This is interesting here. Yeah. I like this aspect of introducing a future person, this Thomas Granger guy, whoever it may be, coming back and kind of, causing some, issues. Again, you're talking about causality, cause and effect. And it's finally playing a little bit more into a cinematic experience where something is going to go down.
Yeah.
The interesting thing here is I'm not sure if they really followed up with this. I can't even remember if there was a fallout from this or not.
If there's a fallout from this situation here?
Yeah, like what is the reason Thomas Granger came back?
Well, what's interesting is we never really know for sure, but we can hypothesize, and I'll get to that.
Sure, you can get to that. Because I'm curious, that was one of the questions I would have had for you.
Well, we'll get to that, yeah.
So,
we can
get to that later, so continue.
So, basically, Abe loses his nerve, and it's revealed that he's had a fail-safe box the entire time in another storage unit, which has been running since before the beginning of everything, basically since early on Monday morning. So this box has been running the whole week, which he started early as his fail-safe. So great idea. Great idea. I really like this part here. So he returns. So he decides that shit's got real. We gotta undo the whole thing. So he gets some oxygen, some water, some nitrous oxide, and he gets back in the box and he travels all the way back to Monday morning in order to undo what's been done. So now we kind of get the loop goes back, and Abe, again, he exits the failsafe box. And what we see now is he actually travels to his house and he gasses his double, or his present time self. So future Abe gasses present time Abe with the nitrous oxide in order that they don't cross paths, or so that he has time to change things. And we get to that scene before where Abe approaches Aaron on the bench. So it's the same, only Aaron is now different, or Abe is different. Aaron's sitting there, supposed to listen to basketball. But Abe is definitely in a bad place. He's ill. He's had 4 days, no food, little water. He's in shock. Aaron is keeping this conversation the same as possible. Abe is not following. And when Abe falls over this time, which didn't happen before, the earpiece that Aaron is wearing falls out. And we were led to believe that Aaron was listening to basketball before March Madness, as what he said. We actually hear a recording of the very conversation that he is having with Abe at that moment. And this means that this Aaron is not the original timeline Aaron. This is an Aaron who has come back. Yeah, it's future Aaron. Yeah. So shit got real quick here. How did you find the reveal that this is future Aaron, not present day Aaron?
No, I liked it. It was a nice little twist. You didn't see it coming. Again, the movie is a bit confusing. So after thinking about it a little bit more after the movie was done, then I got it. I mean, I obviously with the earpiece, that was a future Aaron. But you're just still kind of putting it all together. Okay, is he from the past? Is he from the future? Obviously, then it's from the future once you put 2 and 2 together. So I liked this aspect of it. Again, getting back into a little bit of a cinematic experience trope kind of twist. So it was nice. I liked it.
Yeah.
It's not I am your father, but it's
no.
Good. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I love a twist where it's like you don't see it coming, but when it happens, it's, things start to sort of coalesce in your mind, right? So I kind of like that. So at this point here,
he's Kaiser.
Yeah, he is. This is the Kaiser Soze moment here for sure. So here's a point. So before where I said, there was a point in the dialogue where Aaron had said they're not, where the boxes were one-time use only. Now we hear from Aaron that they're not one-time use only. They're recyclable. So that means that although you can't re-enter the box you climbed out of, you can bring another box back with you and activate it once you climb out and use it later, traveling back to the same moment again, or what would probably be a few minutes later anyway. So what's revealed here is that in the future, Aaron discovered Abe's failsafe box anchored to Monday morning before everything started. He got inside the failsafe, taking with him a second box all folded up and everything to bring back with him.
That's the confusing part because I didn't know you could fold up the damn boxes.
Yeah, well, he said
it's not really explained the construction of these boxes. You think they're pretty solid. So how are you putting a box in a box?
Well, what he said, he said something. Yeah, it's a little confusing. He does say something along the lines of the boxes are modular, so you can kind of break them down and package them up and then sort of build them out again. We don't see how that's possible, but he remarks that that's how they're able to, he was able to do it. So anyway, so he gets back. So Aaron had discovered Abe's failsafe box by looking at records of the storage facility. So he got inside the failsafe, gets out Monday morning, takes with him the second folded up machine. And when he gets back on Monday morning, Aaron from the future sets up his second machine that he brings back as another failsafe box be set for, let's say, 5:15.
Yep. So he's always trying to keep one step ahead or, behind in the past Abe.
That's right.
He's out doing Abe every time they want their failsafe. Abe's going to do his failsafe, so then Aaron's wise to it, and he's going to do his failsafe back more in time before Abe does his failsafe.
That's right.
Yeah. So it's just over and over again. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the loop.
Yeah, that's the loop. Exactly. So Aaron, we'll call this Aaron 2 from the future. So he goes back to his house and he drugs present Aaron. We'll call him Aaron 1's milk. So, because he knows he's going to have breakfast. So he drugs the milk and then he stashes Aaron 1, who's comatose, in the attic. And this means now that there are 2 Aarons in this timeline without any recourse. There's no loop here. So now they're permanently 2 people. So Aaron 2 assumes Aaron 1's identity, and he records all of the week's conversations.
That's why he has it.
That's why he has it. So then he uses his failsafe that he brought back with him to go back in time to Monday again, and takes another machine with him, which he has as another failsafe box. And we'll call this Aaron 3. Mm-hmm. So Aaron 3 goes back to his house just as Aaron 2 has finished drugging and stashing Aaron 1 in the attic. And Aaron 3 tries to subdue Aaron 2, but he's too exhausted. He's been through the machine too many times, and Aaron 2 wins. But after they talk, Aaron 3 persuades Aaron 2 to leave. So now we have 3 versions of Aaron in this timeline. Yeah. So we have Aaron 1 in the attic. We have Aaron 2, who's been convinced to leave town. We have Aaron 3, who's the guy who had the earphone in his head with the recorded conversations in order to, well, presumably make the changes in this timeline. We don't know exactly what it needs to be.
Yeah, this is where I was starting to get confused, is what's his end game.
Yeah, what's his end game? Exactly. Yeah.
And that's, again, talk about it later, but yeah, that's where I'm just kind of saying, what's the goal of trying to, I get if you want to always be the guy in charge of that first failsafe in the past.
Yeah.
You always want to outdo Abe, but I really don't understand what's his goal and objective here.
Right.
I am only assuming it's just that.
Well,
He's in control. He's got the one who can go back no matter what before Abe can.
Right, exactly. Yeah, well, there is an end goal, I believe.
All right, so keep going.
Okay, so that's the next thing. So basically what's happened is Aaron's chose to come back in time, and he's basically duplicated himself twice. So what we know about the future is at that birthday party, we know that Rachel's ex-boyfriend showed up with waving around a shotgun, and Aaron had risked his life to successfully, peacefully diffuse the situation, right?
Yeah.
So, we see a couple, points where Aaron 3 is explaining to Abe about, who he is and like why, and he's come back. He intimates that it was himself, Aaron, who had been the cause of Rachel's ex-boyfriend showing up because he invited the boyfriend's cousin to the party and suggested that he bring the ex-boyfriend with him, and he shows up to this party. So, I think what this pieces together is that we know that Abe's girlfriend's father, Thomas Granger, himself decided that it was imperative to come back in time. So although we never know what happens in that future timeline, I think we can infer from this that in the future timeline, Abe's girlfriend was killed or severely injured by the ex-boyfriend and his shotgun. And that's why he came back in time.
Yeah.
And Aaron's taken it upon himself. Like, there was that party where she wasn't injured because he diffused the situation, but he wants now engineer events so that, I assume there's no danger. Everything's perfect, but this guy still gets arrested.
And he comes out a hero.
Yeah. So we're good. We're on the same page.
Yeah, I got that. Yeah.
Okay. So they basically, so where are we at here? So now we're on Tuesday, the second time through. Hold on a sec. I skipped something here. So basically, we hear sort of the voiceover saying, we don't know how many times it took to get, or to reverse engineer the perfect moment, but for future Abe and Aaron 3, it works. They managed to diffuse the situation. The jealous ex goes away, and that's the end of that crisis. On Tuesday, Aaron 1 wakes up from his attic. Abe 1 wakes up. And so those guys are, if you will, the proper inhabitants of that timeline. So Abe and Aaron, they're at the airport. Abe's contention is that these guys are going to be building their own boxes in another day. His argument is he's going to stay behind. He's going to sabotage the boxes. He's going to make sure that they never build them. Aaron's suggesting they steal their passports, get on a plane, get the heck out of Dodge, and they can make a bunch of money on March Madness. They know all the results anyway. And this is where they go their separate ways. Abe stays behind. Aaron goes off. And on the other side of the world, Aaron 2, he's making what's presumably this warehouse-sized box. We don't know what his purpose is, and the end. Yeah. Movie ends. Yeah.
It's an odd ending.
It is an odd ending. Yeah. So what did you think about, the crisis, his motivation for coming back to avert it? How did it play out? Was it satisfying to you, or is it just a giant clusterfuck? You don't know what the fuck's going on?
You've explained it well, and I got it in the first pass viewing, is his first thought of going back is to prevent Rachel from potentially dying or getting injured.
Yeah.
That's one of his goals or end games. When I was talking about end game, I wasn't really referring to that. That was one of the reasons to go back, and then another reason is to make money. So I think his first reason was, let's make the money. Now, okay, you want to punch that guy in the face and then erase it, okay, but then you also want to save Rachel or prevent Rachel from getting hurt and getting that guy into jail. That's fine. Yeah. Aside from that, I was a bit confused, and I think it's a bit confusing for the audience on what Aaron's main end game is beyond these three events, except for always wanting to be the one in control. As I was saying, I think if they played the storyline a little bit more of Aaron versus Abe, in the sense that Aaron wanted to, once he realized that Abe had the failsafe, to go back to the beginning. He says, fuck that shit, because he can screw me over at any time. He has the ace card. I'm going to go back and do the same thing, but I'm going to go before his failsafe.
Yeah.
I'm in control.
Yeah.
I think that would have been a bit more of an interesting story or a missed opportunity there. They did it very briefly, but I think that would have been a bit more interesting instead of them just talking about too many Aarons and Abes in one timeline, and the drugging and the playing up the Rachel card. And then him going over to the warehouse at the end with Aaron too is kind of ho-hum the way they kind of settled that last little bit here.
Yeah.
I wasn't really satisfied.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough. I mean, I don't know that the true emotional conflict held a lot of weight because it was about, Abe's girlfriend, who isn't a character that we got to know at all. We don't know her. So, and it's strange that it's Aaron who's motivated to save her, not Abe. But I mean, I suppose Aaron's the one who actually knows what happens. But yeah, I kind of agree. It's a little bit ho-hum. It's sort of a manufactured crisis. I mean, it's interesting how the causality sort of works out. And that, the time travel aspect, but you're right. I think it would have been more interesting if, somehow they're played off of each other as opposed to dealing with, some other, manufactured crisis, if you will.
Yeah, I agree. A bit disappointing in the ending there. And then I wanted to ask you then, what was your take on him with the warehouse? Like, what's he doing there? Is this more like he's going to be sending large groups of people or armies back into time?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I mean, I remember him, because he had referenced earlier, that they could build a larger box, right? Something the size of a warehouse or something, presumably so that they could, send lots of people back, or at least be able to house supplies so that, you could go back further. I mean, you can't go back in time farther than when you built the box. But 20 years in the future, you had enough supplies. I suppose theoretically you could come back in time 20 years. You have a large enough warehouse, you have enough supplies to do so. So what was his objective at this point? I think his objective at this point was that he didn't know what his objective was, but he wanted to make anything possible at that point. He wanted to be able to, create the ultimate fail-safe, where I could have a facility so large and so powerful that whatever I wanted to bring back, I could. If I need to bring back an army, I can do it. If I need to bring back 20 people 10 years and just have enough supplies for 10 years, I can do it. Or build it large enough and then bring everybody back in time to build another fail-safe box at the exact same time, effectively, so we can have two giant warehouse. I mean, I think it's a little unclear, and I think that his motivations are unclear. He's more thinking like, I'm going to do it because I can, and that's going to open up all potential avenues to me, so I could do whatever I want.
I like that they play it ambiguous in this sense, like how you're bringing it up, because then it's left to the viewer to interpret is this a good thing or a bad thing? Because maybe he's gonna seriously fuck up the world. Or the potential could be there, as you're talking about, bringing back armies, bringing back other things, or if it's long enough, you could bring back weapons.
Yeah.
Whatever the application is, whatever the intention is, that threat is there. But from a cinematic point of view, I kind of wish they chose something at this point, because maybe he didn't have to choose something and show like a bunch of, an actual army marching towards this thing or anything like that. I'm not saying something like that, but a little bit more sense of dread to kind of give the viewer a little bit, oh shit, like he could really do anything. Instead here, it just looks like one could interpret it as, oh, well, now I'm, instead of my own garage, like we were talking about, he's now, a big producer, big business, and I'm going to make these for everybody or something like that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I just wish they kind of did something different there in the end. Yeah, it's just, it wasn't satisfying.
Yeah, fair enough. I can see what you're saying there. That being said, I don't know. Maybe it would have been dishonest to the movie to have something more spelled out there, because the entire movie is a puzzle to be pieced together. Mm-hmm. So if they had done something more concrete there, I don't know if that would have fit exactly with the structure of the narrative to that point. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like nothing's explained at all. So to explain what he's doing and why wouldn't really be consistent, I think, in my opinion.
Yeah, maybe. You're probably right. They probably kept it consistent.
Yeah. So, a couple questions I've got as we've wrapped it up here. The director has said he kind of deliberately obfuscated the plot, because in his opinion, the time travel, if you were there, would be extremely confusing. So he wanted us to be confused. I think it's fair to say that the average viewer is going to be confused on their first watch, their first run through of Primer. Do you think that serves the movie, or is that detracting from it?
In terms of the mechanism of the time travel, I like it. And then the surprising of the fail-safe and then another fail-safe and the twists, I think that served the movie very well, because this is not your run-of-the-mill thriller. Mm-hmm. They're more interested in the discovery of the mechanisms of the time traveling itself and the different possibilities, right? With these fail-safes. Yeah. And I think that was the heart of the story. So if you make it less confusing, if you mainstream it, I think you lose some of that strength. Yeah. Because the rest of the movie, you got no budget. You've got no action scenes. You've got no big ending. You kind of not only betray the heart of the movie, like what your focus is, but I don't really see how you can really play it any other way on this kind of budget. They played up the card of the science and making this feel grounded and real. And they kept it confusing because of that. Because that's, tech is confusing unless you're involved in the business itself, or you made the thing yourself. Tech is confusing. So I think they played that well. Mm-hmm. So I enjoyed that aspect.
Yeah, I agree. I think that for the most part, there's some interesting examples of this movie where the form of the film follows the content. Like you say there, the tech is confusing to them. It ought to be confusing to us. And even if you think about the movie itself, you have to kind of go back and watch it maybe a second time or a third time in order to get everything out of it. In a sense, that sort of mirrors what happens in the movie, where they have to go back again and again in order to figure everything out. Right. So I kind of found a parallel there where the film seemed designed, for me to rewatch it, which mirrors, their journey, right? Going back again and again. So I thought that was, I don't know if that was deliberate or not, but I pulled that out. I thought it was, pretty interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, that's an interesting comparison there. Going into the other aspects of the movie, though, I think they could have just trimmed some of that beginning stuff with the moss, and then maybe even eliminating this Thomas Granger coming back in time character. Because, I think if you keep the tech around the time travel confusing for the realism part, I think some of these other storylines they didn't need to confuse the viewers even further.
See, that's interesting that you say, because I was thinking about that as well. But if you look at the runtime of this movie, the movie runs about 85 minutes. Like, it's not even an hour and a half long. So I'm wondering if they could trim any more from this, because then then it's a short film. You know what I mean? Cause I kind of had the same thought, like, is this necessary? And I felt that it was necessary. In fact, I was reading when as they shot this film, they shot 90 minutes and the end movie was like 87 minutes long. Like, they only cut one small scene out of it that they felt was unnecessary. So would you say that they just need to cut that stuff out entirely, or they should have kind of cut that and replaced it with something else that would have moved, the plot to where it needed to be?
I think they could have cut it and put something else in there, a bit more interesting. As we were talking about, I think then the focus of him just wanting to go back and save Rachel, and I think you could have kept those scenes.
Yeah.
As his first intentions of what he wanted to do. But then I think, as we talked about, I think they had the opportunity to play Abe versus Aaron a bit more. They didn't go down that route, in my opinion, which is a detriment to the film. Because they still, in the end, have that conflict. Still Abe versus Aaron, but they could have played that angle up a little bit more. In my opinion, I think so.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's an interesting point. I kind of think you're right, because we sort of agree that end conflict is kind of manufactured. They could have restructured perhaps to have the conflict between the two of them, more solidly. That might have made for a stronger conclusion anyway. But, just from a film standpoint, we basically have a couple of first-time amateur actors here. How did they come across to you? Like, did you enjoy it?
I thought they did pretty good job for, obviously, you're watching a very low budget movie. These aren't your grade A actors here. You don't know who they are or where they came from. So I didn't expect a lot from them, and they didn't do a half bad job.
Yeah, no, I agree. I kind of like the understated nature of these guys. They didn't try to put too much into it. It felt pretty genuine. The main character there, Aaron, played by the director, Shane Carruth. He was an engineer himself, so he was kind of bringing some of his just natural inclinations, just being himself in the film. And I thought that served it well. Again, it kind of goes along with sort of the low budget, grainy look. Like the movie, it looks like it was made out of somebody's garage, which, mirrors again the content of the film. This is just something. It's a low budget time machine that these guys built. And the look of the film, I thought, mirrored that as well, which, I thought was great. I also liked the overall idea is kind of contained, it keeps the story personal. And I guess what I mean by that is just the nature of how their time travel works. You can't go back in time further than when you built the box. So that keeps events within, your kind of timeline. And also, you have the physical constraints of being inside the box. You have to consider food and air and water. So there's a finite period where you can actually get into this box and travel back in time, and it keeps the story very personal. I mean, again, obviously it's low budget, so they have to keep it that way, but I like that, it all makes sense. They don't have to, it's like, I got a low budget movie, but I got a time machine, I can do anything, but because I got a low budget, I can only go back in time one day and make money in the stock market. They make it work with the science that they have available to them. So I thought that was a really smart choice.
Yeah. I agree.
So I don't know. We tackled some of the big issues there with fate, predestination. Do you have any other, thoughts or discussion points you kind of want to bring up on Primer before we kind of move to our recommendation portion?
Tough to say. I think we hammered all the main topics here. I guess the one question I will have for you, just with respect to the science and of the mechanism of the time travel itself. Did you find it pretty much bulletproof? Because you mentioned that at the beginning of the podcast, you're looking for that foolproof time travel science fiction story. Now, I'm not talking about the whole movie itself. I'm just now talking about the actual science behind the time travel. Here, did it work for you? And was it perfect? Is that better than the other time travel mechanisms that you've experienced in other movies you've seen or other stories?
Was it perfect? I don't know that I have enough of a handle even now on the entire story to say it was perfect, that there weren't holes in it. I found that the method of time travel was very unique, and I really liked that. And it's pretty close. I think it's pretty close to what I would consider following its own logic and not deviating and it making sense.
I would agree. Yeah. I would agree. I think this is one of the better mechanisms of time travel that I've seen. The only drawback is, and it's very hard to do, it's a low budget movie, because time travel obviously doesn't exist, so how do you explain them building this thing? But I felt there were some shortcomings in the way they were building the thing with minimal explanation. I mean, and not with the exposition, but I didn't need tons of exposition, and I know there was some jargon there and stuff like that. And they showed some thought and some steps into slowly building this thing. I just felt that portion could have been a bit better, or a little bit more, I hate to use the word, but entertaining.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? In that aspect. I think that it wasn't entertaining in that aspect for me. That's unfortunate.
Yeah. Well, I think the way I saw it is, I mean, how much do you want to explain your time travel, right? They explained it a little bit. You know, we see a machine that's basically an anti-gravity machine.
No, but you know what I mean? Okay, so let me just say, maybe I should elaborate. To me, it just looks like they're building a metal fucking box. And they're putting something inside of it, and it doesn't look impressive. So, what the fuck is going on here? Like, maybe if you show me having a catalytic reaction, or something going on, or something interesting, because all of this is fake. They just, visually speaking, I think they could have done something a little different there, but again, because you have almost no budget, what are you going to do?
Right,
So
exactly.
I understand the limitations, but in the end, do I forgive the movie for that or not? I don't know. That's an interesting, you'd have to think about that.
Yeah, fair enough. So I guess then you got to make the decision, you know, as a viewer. I mean, obviously it's a low budget film, so yeah, is it enough? Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, for me, I felt it was enough, because I could make the leaps that my brain needed to in order to kind of believe what they were doing. But, I mean, obviously they had to make choices with the film because of the budget constraints. And as we've talked about on previous episodes, sometimes the constraints make for more creative choices on the filmmaker's part. I think they did an effective job of turning that into, you know, the guys building the thing in their garage. I mean, is it easy to believe that they could build a time machine in their garage by accident? Well, I guess it's a bit of a leap, but I don't know. For me, it kind of fits, I suppose, because it's the story that they're telling. Okay. Well, I mean, I think that, maybe we can wrap up the 2004, ball-busting mindfuck that is Primer. So, Harry, I will pose the question to you. Is this a recommendation? Is this a rare antiquity? And why or why not?
This will be an interesting answer.
Okay.
You know how we say recommendation and rare antiquities are two different things?
Yeah.
I'm going to say I'm impressed, very impressed, and hats off to this movie because it had no budget. These are amateur filmmakers, and they crafted a unique, authentically unique story, which was very good. But entertaining, it is not, in my opinion. It makes you think, which I like. I like my movies to make me think. But, you know, in some aspects here, I felt like I was watching almost a documentary. You know, it wasn't, it's not entertaining. So, and then there are faults with the story. I mean, obviously you have inexperienced filmmakers. So I think they could have played up certain different angles, as we talked about, the Abe versus Aaron. Some of the end game motivations was a bit confusing. I'm not against the science being confusing, and I like that aspect. But then I like some of the other motivations and the characters to be a bit more in depth. Because right now I'm still having a hard time understanding what's motivating Aaron in particular. Yeah. Abe's a bit more straightforward, but Aaron in particular, I don't know really what he's doing. In the end, again, while it's nice to leave it ambiguous, I kind of wish they gave a hint in his, again, and I think maybe you wouldn't have to have done that if the character was a little bit more had more layers beforehand. But they made it simple and realistic, so I understand why they were doing it. So I would give it it's a recommend. I would say it's really geared more towards people who want to think. If you're looking to be entertained, forget it. Go somewhere else. But if you don't mind, if you like science fiction and you're not afraid to think outside the box to really understand the movie, you're going to have a good time with this movie. It's well worth the watch. But as an overall feature, it's a mixed bag in terms of the recommendation. So I put it as a weak recommend, but saying that, it's a rare antiquity.
Interesting.
Because it is a unique story. You haven't experienced time travel, then multiple loops and the twists that have happened in this movie. And because it's an amateur movie, I have to give them kudos to give them that rare antiquity vote. I mean, how can you not? Because it's it's unique. That's why it's a rare antiquity.
Interesting. Yep. No, that's an interesting choice you made there.
Because it's usually other way around.
The other way around,
It's
yeah.
got to be a really good recommendation, and then is it a rare antiquity?
Right.
But here,
right.
it's like, from my perspective, weak recommend, barely, but it is a rare antiquity.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely understand what you're saying there. It's a difficult movie, and yeah, from a more traditional standpoint, it doesn't have a lot of the entertainment value that, we might be looking for in a film. Unless you really get your thrills out of your mind getting twisted into a pretzel and you're trying to work out a puzzle. Like, if you're entertained by trying to solve a Rubik's Cube, for example, then you'll probably be entertained by this because that's what you like. If you're like me and you want to throw a Rubik's Cube through the front fucking window, you might just get frustrated by this movie. So I can see what you're saying. I am going to give it a recommendation because
How
high?
Is this like a bare recommend? Is this a very high recommend? Like, you have to kind of give me some of insight there.
Yeah, I'm going to give it a moderate recommend, but to people who enjoy the puzzle. If you like a puzzle and you enjoy a film where you have to watch it a second or a third time in order to figure out everything that's going on, if you find that entertaining, yeah, I got to recommend it. And I appreciate that movies are like that. I was entertained. By your criteria, you bastard, by rigging the game on me here, son of a bitch. I guess I got to agree with you there. If it's not strictly speaking entertaining from a traditional standpoint. But is this a rare antiquity? Yeah, absolutely. This is a rare antiquity. It's unique. It's experimental. It does things that, you don't see because it's not traditionally entertaining. It can kind of throw out a traditional narrative and craft the story in its own unique way. And I really appreciate that, especially nowadays when every movie seems like a copy of the last. It might be entertaining, but it's empty. And this, for its problems, which it does have.
This isn't a J.J. Abrams movie.
No, this is not a J.J. Abrams. This is not a J.J. Abrams joint, ladies and gentlemen. It is.
So I guess then a lot of, depending on your viewpoint of J.J. Abrams, you're either going to run for the hills or you're going to run towards this movie.
Yeah. You know what? That's actually a really good way of putting it because, JJ has made a science out of the paint by numbers, entertainment factory, right? The movies are very particularly structured in a certain way. And that's what lots of people find entertaining, including myself. I generally am entertained by JJ's movies. My brain isn't really engaged. But I appreciate a hard intellectual sci-fi movie. And, so that's a rare antiquity for me, for sure. So
I agree.
All right. I guess that wraps up, Primer. Harry, why don't you surprise us with, your next choice?
Well, I'm not 100% sure if you've seen it. I'd probably wager right now you probably have. It's a movie, again, that I had not seen, surprisingly, but it's always been on my radar once again. The Tim Robbins psychological drama / thriller, Jacob's Ladder.
Oh, no, I've never seen Jacob's Ladder.
So, yep, that's what we're doing next time.
Nice.
Yeah. So
nice.
I've already seen it over the last weekend here. I did watch it. Yeah, so it should be an interesting talk. We'll see what you think next time.
Awesome. Right on. No, I'm looking forward to it. It's been on my radar, so I'm glad we're digging into that one. All right, man. Well, thanks for being on the show, discussing the Brain Pretzel Primer, and we'll catch you next week.
Sounds good. It was fun.
All right, man. Talk to you.